All right, so we have a jam-packed hour for you all today. We're going to go ahead and get started. Really excited to see people calling in from all over the country. We hope that you will walk away today feeling inspired and empowered around early literacy, and we're excited to kick this time off with you. I just wanted to remind you that all of the materials that are shared today, you're going to get some over the course of the webinar in the chat as we're talking through some things, but you'll also get links to things, including a recording of this webinar through your email. And so just know that all the tools and resources that we're sharing today will be readily available to you. Also, we are going to have a Q&A session at the end of this webinar. So as you're thinking of questions, feel free to pop those in the Q&A, and we'll get to as many of those at the end of the day as we possibly can. Okay, so let's go ahead and go through some introductions and our agenda, and then we'll get started. I'll go first. I'm Julie Parrish. I am the Director of Early Literacy at Instruction Partners. And if I've not got a chance to meet you before, I've been with Instruction Partners for about 5.5 years. I've spent my entire career in education, and my deepest passion is early literacy. I've played many roles, but I have the honor and privilege of being able to lead the development of the early literacy services and work alongside the two amazing women that you're going to hear today in partnership. So I'm going to give them an opportunity to share a little bit about them. I'm calling in also right outside of Nashville, Tennessee in Murfreesboro. Sarah, I'll kick it off to you.
Sure. I'm Sarah Aiken. I'm the Director of Elementary Education for Haywood County Schools. Welcome to our webinar. I had a small panic attack when I had a tech issue coming online, but everything is good now. So forgive me for not welcoming you sooner. I am the Director of Elementary Ed. I support pre-K through 4th grade here in Haywood County Schools. This is my 4th year to do so. And I have worked really closely with Julie and IP over the past 3 years. In development of our early literacy implementation here in Haywood County. So excited to be here, and thank you for coming.
My name is Cindy Currie, and I'm a kindergarten teacher of an inclusion classroom here in Haywood County, and I work at Anderson Early Childhood Center.
Thank you, ladies, and really excited for you all to get to know them. They really are the stars of the show today. So I'm just ready. I'm just really excited about what they're going to share with you. Here is our agenda. As you can see, we've got a pretty jam-packed hour. We're going to go in first into just giving you an overview of what our partnership looks like and how we got to be where we are. Give you a quick overview of the essential practices in early literacy that were developed by the Instruction Partners team that were leveraged for this work that Haywood is doing. We're going to walk you through what their pathway has looked like to early literacy systemic improvement and how that is producing outcomes for students, including an incredible story from Miss Cindy around what she's seeing in her classroom, as well as lesson learned from our whole team around what this process has been like. You know, when you're implementing change, sometimes it is challenging, and of course it's had challenges. So we want to be transparent about those as well. And then after that, we'll give you an opportunity to ask questions, and we'll get to as many as we can. Again, welcome to put those questions in the chat at any point. All right, let's go ahead and dig right in. So in the next few minutes, we want to be able to tell you a little bit about our early literacy partnership. And Sarah's going to kick us off by talking about where they were in 2020.
Sure. So to kind of set the stage for you, we are Haywood County in rural West Tennessee. We're just shy of about 2,700 students, ages pre-K 3 through 12th grade. Prior to 2020, prior to the pandemic, the majority of our K2 students in Haywood County qualified for what we called RTI, or reading intervention. So students were receiving intervention due to their qualification there, but they weren't really experiencing substantial change. So as a leadership team, we started having some conversations internally and knew we needed to rethink how we were approaching our literacy intervention in a way that would make real change for our students. So that is when we partnered with IP.
And simultaneously, we were really exploring what it takes to build and scale effective early literacy systems. The pandemic, of course, had created a real sense of urgency around early literacy instruction and what was happening in instruction in order to really meet the needs of every student. And it was more important than ever to really ground ourselves in what we knew that worked for teaching children to read and figuring out what type of system do we need to have in place to ensure that that was happening. So we combed through the research and we came up with a set of 5 essential practices for building and strengthening an early literacy system. And so we had been working with Haywood County previous to or prior year to 2020, including supporting them in choosing their curriculum. And so we had a great relationship, and I thought, what a better place and a team to partner up with to really figure out how to strengthen the early literacy system within Haywood County, which was already in place and thriving in terms of the right people in the right places. But they had a lot of work that they wanted to do. And so we knew that it was it made it like a really good partnership, and also gave us the opportunity to test out the things that we were developing and figure out what we needed to refine. So this definitely has been a learning partnership. So Sarah, if you'll speak a little bit to the data now.
Yes, ma'am. So to tell you a little bit about our story here, if you're familiar with Aimsweb, that's where this data is pulled from. Prior to the pandemic, we had a high number of students that fell in that in the bottom 2 quintiles. So we already knew, like, there's a shift that needs to happen here. If you're familiar with RTI, we're looking at these students as they qualify for tier 2 and tier 3, or with Aimsweb, their color is yellow or red. So just kind of give you the idea of that data. On this screen, you'll see the students in the bottom quintile. I'm sorry, I lost myself again. The students in the bottom quintiles are the 25th percentile and below. So looking at our students here, kindergarten of 2019, 2020, those students were 32% in the bottom quintile. First grade, 40% were in the bottom quintile, and then second grade, 28% in the bottom quintile. Larger numbers than we'd like to see. However, the pandemic took us out of school, eliminated the opportunity for us to teach these students in such a way that it significantly impacted those bottom quintiles. When we came back the following year, the kindergarten students, 47% were in the bottom 2 quintiles. In first grade, 81% of those students were in the bottom 2 quintiles. And in second grade, 64% of our students were in the bottom 2 quintiles.
So as you can see, those numbers were definitely startling. And so we were very anxious to get to work to figure out a way to start seeing some gains and to support students and ensure that we were moving them toward reading proficiency. Before we get into that journey, I want to give you a quick overview of the 5 essential practices so that you can kind of get an idea of what we have been working with. Some of you may have already seen some of our tools and resources on our website. If you haven't yet, I encourage you to take a look at those. But I think our team has dropped a link to the essential practices in the chat for you. And we're going to go ahead and dig into those. So as we said a moment ago, we've combed through the research and identified 5 system-wide practices, along with a set of aligned indicators that, when put into place effectively, result in accelerating early literacy achievement for students if the system is leveraged to support instruction. These practices are not only about addressing pandemic unfinished learning, but we expect that they will be used for years after to be able to drive early literacy programming beyond the pandemic, the pandemic, so the systems can reliably and consistently ensure strong foundational literacy achievement for students. So let's go ahead and take a look at each practice a bit more closely. We're going to start with essential practice 1, which is vision. When you're thinking around this particular essential practice, it really is the anchor for all of the work. It's important to ensure that that vision really names that you're committed to providing instruction around research-informed practices. And also equally important, it is important to say that you have the mindset that everyone is operating under the mindset that all students can and will read proficiently by the end of second grade. And that you take that vision and that you're able to communicate that very, very clearly to all of the stakeholders involved and help them to understand their individual role in realizing that vision. And it's also important to ensure that team communication, collaboration, and instructional decision-making really reflect an understanding of that vision and kind of drive everything moving forward. And you're going to hear a little bit from Sarah in a moment around what that's looked like in Haywood County. Let's go ahead and take a look now at materials. So the indicators within this practice speak to ensuring that high quality research aligned materials are in use that provide both systematic and explicit foundational skills instruction, as well as content rich reading materials that build knowledge and vocabulary. So really attending to both sides of the rope, Scarborough's rope. And we also want to ensure that curriculum embedded assessments are being used consistently and effectively, along with the support materials provided by the curriculum to drive both whole group and small group instruction. And lastly, the practice really speaks to the importance of any and all additional materials that you're using, whether it be for intervention or anything supplemental, that they are structured and they're systematic and that they are designed to amplify and accelerate learning from the tier 1 materials. And so I want you to keep that in mind when they're speaking to what we decided to do in terms of small group, in terms of aligning those materials. All right, let's go ahead and move into data. And one of the things that you're going to notice when you open up this essential practice is there are a lot of indicators. We know that data systems can be complex, but the outcome of an effective data system is really, really worth the effort. The indicators focus on ensuring that a universal screener is in place to track student progress toward grade level benchmarks. And of equal importance, that there is a diagnostic in place that allows for teachers to really pinpoint the specific skills that they have mastered, as well as the skills that they're still working to develop and need further instruction and practice around. Also, formative assessments from the curriculum to assess, where students are in terms of where the instruction that they're being taught every day in the classroom, and progress monitoring tools to determine how students are progressing against their individual goals and learning targets, as well as those skill targets that they're working on each day in their classroom. So once we have all of those assessments in place, which is a job in itself, we can't just collect. We need to be able to analyze and talk about it and discuss how that's going to inform instruction. So once those assessments are chosen, it's important that data cycles are in place to ensure that data is collected and analyzed from those 4 assessment types in a way that reveals what student progress is towards those individual goals and learning targets. And also they should be able to be used to figure out what's really effective about the instruction that they're receiving and what adjustments need to be made to ensure that we are supporting students in reaching student mastery, which is what we want. And lastly, that we want to ensure that all of this information is really transparent between the teacher, the students themselves, and all stakeholders, including their families, any support staff member that is helping them to achieve their goals, that all of that information is really clearly communicated. Okay, next one, team. And this one is also very robust, but so very important. The team, we say teamwork makes the dream work. And that really is the case with this particular essential practice. It really is all about the team and how that team is utilized to support both teachers and students in reaching reading proficiency and that reading proficiency journey. Your teams are going to look different based on your context. But we know that they should include, but not be limited to, district and school leaders, coaches, teachers, interventionists, and that all of those team members should have clear roles and responsibilities, and that there's a leader, whether that's at the district or the school level or both, that's really leading the charge around implementation and support for all of these folks that are on the team to be able to fulfill that mission, that vision, and carry out their role and responsibilities well. It is very important also, and the practice speaks to this, that the team that you design, they're well trained. How can they support teachers well if they don't have the skills and knowledge that they need to be able to provide that training? So strong content knowledge and a clear understanding of how to productively use data to move students toward reading proficiency. We want to ensure that members of the leadership team are really, really intentional. Within your literacy team, you will have a leadership team that's making those really important decisions. And in order to be able to make those decisions, it's very important that they are able to really collect as much data as possible, both quantitative and qualitative. So really pulling in the voice of those that are engaged in the work and students who are immersed in the work, and being able to take a step back and to be able to use all of that data that they're collecting through walkthroughs and focus groups to be able to refine the program, create ongoing professional learning, and to be able to identify whether or not there are any supplemental resources or strategies that may need to be put in place to be able to do the work well. And after they're finished with that, it is equally important as all of the things that I just shared to make sure that all adults that are supporting the early literacy program are engaging in ongoing professional learning, including training and coaching in those research-aligned practices to teach kids to read, and the specific curriculum resources that are being used to do the work. And last but not least, time. And I know this is no surprise for you all on the call to know that this has come up. Time is always a challenge, but this practice really speaks to ensuring that there is time that is dedicated and protected for both teachers to provide instruction, but also for teachers and leaders alike to be able to receive the professional learning they need and to collaborate with their peers and their colleagues to be able to support students. And so we want to make sure that there is enough instructional time, no less than 120 minutes for students to engage in that Tier 1 literacy content, that there's time for those necessary tiered interventions, and also that we have time allocated each week for all adults who are supporting that early literacy programming to receive ongoing time for professional learning, collaborative planning, and also to engage in data cycles. So that is a lot of talking on my end around the essential practices and the overview. I hope that that's a very quick rundown. But again, there's lots of information on our website around that takes you in depth a bit more, and we're happy to answer any questions around those as well. So what you see on the screen now is the pathway that we took when we first started this work with the Haywood team. So when we initially designed the essential practices, we numbered them and gave them titles because it was easier to talk through them at a high level. So starting with a vision, getting the right materials and assessments in place, ensuring that you have an early literacy team and that that team is well trained to support implementation, and that there is time protected to make all of it happen. However, we want to make it clear that you do not implement each of the essential practices in isolation. This is work that is taking place simultaneously in tandem. And one of our key roles within our pilot is to determine which of the implementation pathways within the practices is actually most effective and produces learning outcomes for students the fastest. And so this is one of the things that we're actively engaging in work around to determine what's the best possible pathway. So right here, I'll just give you a quick opportunity to look over that pathway. And this is where we started. And this is where, yes, Jonathan, you were right. Curriculum embedded training, so critical. I just saw that coming in the chat. We want to give you an opportunity to look at this. And then Sarah's going to lead you through what the work looked like inside this pathway.
Okay, so we started our work with Essential Practice 1, which was our vision. We spent an afternoon with instruction partners. We gathered our early literacy team at the district level as well as the school level, just to bring all everyone to the same page on where we were going with our vision. Our district at the time was very much so aligned with our core values, a district vision, a mission, and also an equity commitment. And we wanted to ensure that our vision for early literacy was in alignment with all of that. So it was our belief that we were going to anchor our vision in the science of reading, and we wanted to ensure that everyone was able to say that they believed that our students could read proficiently by the end of second grade. So when we came together, we wanted to ensure we were able to communicate this vision at a high level also. Out of this work session, this is the vision that you see on the screen that was born. We presented this vision to all of our staff during our beginning of the year professional development, and it is referenced consistently through other professional developments that we have within our district around early literacy and PLCs and our school level meetings, also in our district level meetings. We anchor in how we see this vision come to life in our day-to-day work, as well as pushing decisions that we make against this vision to ensure we are staying true to that North Star that our students will be able to read proficiently upon entering third grade. Miss Julie, you're muted. I'm sorry.
So sorry, didn't realize I was still on mute. So there are three things that we want to make sure we're highlighting here. The first one, the vision is focused on all students in grades K through 2. The commitment to equity is embedded in an integral part of this vision, and it really does live and breathe inside the schools. And also that the expectation is set that all stakeholders should operate under the belief that all students can and will read proficiently by the time that they enter the third grade.
So just to reiterate, in our district, we have to be very intentional and consistent with communicating our vision with our stakeholders to ensure that our vision is anchoring in our work. We've worked really hard to keep the vision at the forefront of all of our efforts in early literacy and really pressing those actions and decisions that we're making for our students against the vision to ensure we're making the best student-centered decisions for our students. Our vision's posted in PLC rooms across the district. Our district PLC room here at the board office also has the vision posted. They're actually posted outside some of the schools. We communicate them in training. Our emails and agendas are they're on there so that we ensure that we are talking towards that vision every time.
So in conjunction with the vision setting and the communication plan for that vision, the Haywood team worked diligently to make sure that there was a strong team in place to fulfill that vision and that every team member was clear on their roles and responsibilities in fulfilling the vision. So we're getting ready to take a look at the roles and responsibilities chart from the playbook while Sarah tells you a bit more about her early literacy team. And the picture you see just saw on the screen, that was actually 2 members from her team. So a true picture of some of those teammates there.
Absolutely. This is our principal at Anderson Early Childhood and our assistant principal, Ms. Teresa Russell and Chris Halliburton. And they work diligently to ensure that we're able to make things work. Also, I saw Miss Anna Roberts on the call. She's a principal at Haywood Elementary School, and she teaches a small group every single day. So that is how dedicated she is to the effort as well. So just to think over some of our roles and responsibilities here in the district. In this case, in our situation here in Haywood, I am the system leader that oversees the implementation of the project. I am in constant communication with instruction partners Our schools are also in constant communication with instruction partners, but they get to hear from me a lot more. I get to make decisions around professional development and work with our school leaders to build their capacity around early literacy. And also lead conversations during our walkthroughs. So we're grounded in the IPG, and that's part of my job is to keep us there. So also at the district office, we have several people who lead this work too. Currently, our RTI coordinator, Ms. Jean Wills, who's also on the call, is one of my biggest thought partners. She talks to me all the time. We do walkthroughs together. She's my partner in crime. Our director of special education, our deputy superintendent, and at the time of implementation, our superintendent was heavily involved in this work. And if you are a superintendent on the call and thinking about implementing this in your district, your support and your presence in these meetings and development is essential to the success of your school district, I promise. But yes, everyone at the district office supports the work in some sort of way. Our school leadership teams involve our principals, our assistant principals, our instructional coaches. They are the closest people, their closest contact to the teachers. They facilitate most of our PLCs and learning around practices. They analyze data with teachers regularly, and they offer coaching and feedback to teachers that's anchored in our vision for early literacy and that foundational skills IPG. Our educators, of course, are the backbone of the Reader and Writer Project. They're the boots on the ground. They're the closest to the students. They get to touch them every single day and see their progress forward every single day. We greatly appreciate them. They constantly gather data to ensure their instruction is targeted to students' needs, and they offer feedback that we can make adjustments to Reader Writer Project to make sure it is exactly what our students need, but also what they need in their own development as well. And when I refer to stakeholders, I'm talking about anybody else who touches this project. Our educational assistants in Haywood County, if we didn't have them, it wouldn't be possible to do this work. They push in during Reader and Writer Project time. As I mentioned before, one of our principals pushes in during Reader and Writer Project time. Miss Teresa, the assistant principal, does as well. It's truly all hands on deck during this time of our day.
Thank you, Sarah, for sharing that. And if you hear her referring to Reader Writer Project, you're going to hear a lot about that coming up very soon, because that is the instructional approach that we're going to be talking about that the essential practice system was used for. So once the vision was set and the roles developed and clear amongst every stakeholder, we began working together to inventory how the time was being used for instruction, what data analysis was looking like, and ongoing professional learning for early literacy team members to ensure that the system was really set up for success. So the example in the early literacy playbook that you're going to see on the screen is representative of the schedule that was in place for the work that the district's going to be sharing today. Sarah, do you mind walking us through this, particularly around the time allocation for Tier 1 and intervention and professional learning?
Yes, ma'am. Already in our schedule, we had 2 hours allotted to ELA instruction. 1 hour was a literacy block for comprehension and knowledge building. The other was we use EL, so skills block. It was our phonics and phonemic awareness time of the day, our foundational literacy skill part of the day. We had another hour built in our day for intervention. So what we did there is we reclaimed that hour from intervention to incorporate 180 minutes of ELA instruction in our daily schedule. And that is the time that the extra hour is the time that we're referring to as the Reader and Writer Project time. So you might be wondering how that's different. How we're using that time a little different. Before, students were in a prescribed intervention like an SRA or something like that. What we did was we are leveraging our microphase work there. So that's how that time is structured different. This year, the district decided to solely focus on our foundational literacy support, excuse me, hour to accelerate our students' learning and move all students forward towards proficiency in the efforts to ensure our students are reading proficiently at the end of third grade, or at the end of second grade going into third grade. Also, I'll go ahead and run over this. Something that is super important to our district that made another huge impact was just the capacity building that happened when we focused on our leadership and their content knowledge and content building as well. So just as important as it is for our teachers to have that background and content knowledge, our leadership had to as well. So we set aside time for leadership to learn together and plan together through this. So the calendar that you see is just an example of what we did, not this past March, but the March prior. You can see that we have time dedicated to data analysis, program step back to realign things when needed to, and classroom observations, capacity building, and also any future planning that needed to happen around our project. The next one that you see is our professional learning opportunities that we work to engage our teachers and other stakeholders with. So you'll notice things like training and support for various stakeholders, some EAs, some teachers, that are provided over the course of this month, and some are built for one-on-one feedback and support, and some are group in their PLCs.
All right. So thank you very much, Sarah, for that. So as mentioned before, we had worked to support the team in adopting high quality instructional materials for Tier 1 and intervention. And so let's go ahead now and zoom in on how the team saw a need to improve their pre-existing assessment system, including how they work to leverage curriculum embedded assessments to inform next steps in instruction.
Okay, just like many of you are familiar with, we've always used a universal screener to identify our students who fall within national percentiles and at-risk students. But we noticed that data it wasn't enough for us to close the gaps that we needed to close for our students. So with Aimsweb, we closely progress monitor our students who fall in that Tier 2 and Tier 3 categories for at-risk students. We have data team meetings to address how those students are doing, but we weren't really seeing the change that we needed to. So we found that our short data-driven cycles of work help us really improve quickly upon those students' needs. We utilize our cycle assessments throughout the year in order to generate those early wins and build successes together to impact our students' learning. So we collect data at many levels. We have our beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of year benchmarks for students who are in Tier 2 and Tier 3. They have progress monitoring through Aimsweb weekly and biweekly, but also the curriculum level information that we get on a day-to-day basis.
All right. So just want to let you all know that there is an inventory available inside the Essential Practice playbook for you all to be able to go in and kind of inventory your different assessments that are in use. And it also gives you a descriptor around like what each type of assessment is and what they entail. So kind of like some look-fors when you're choosing those assessments to kind of guide the work. We won't spend much time here, but Kate is showing you here on the screen how to get there. It is in Essential Practice 3. And you're able to actually inventory your assessments, and then it gives you an overview of the purpose of each, so that it can kind of drive the choicing of making those decisions around assessment. All right, so we're going to move on from that, and we're going to let you know, or I'm sorry, I'm going to let Sarah provide some context around how she moved from just Aimsweb as the benchmark to really leaning into that diagnostic and curriculum embedded assessments.
So we still use Aimsweb as our universal screener. However, we really leverage our Tier 1 curriculum-based assessment through EL Education. From there, we place our students into micro phases. We build groups around their skill deficit and match them to what they need to work on through the curriculum. We've developed learning targets to accelerate their learning and align our progress monitoring towards those targets. And we ask teachers that they progress monitor those targets every 2 weeks. But we know that best practice is that every time you sit down in front of a child, you're gathering information from them. Every 4.5 weeks, we have data team meetings to discuss our students' progress towards those targets. We also look at those students who are being progress monitored with Aimsweb. But what we really want to look at is what moves the needle, and that's where kids truly are as far as their skills go. Ms. Sheila, you're muted again.
This is a problem in my day-to-day life with work, just so you all know that. The vision was in place. The time was protected. The data collection plan was in place. The curriculum aligned student goals and learning targets. The right materials were in use. There was a team established and trained in research aligned practices and foundational skills. So lots of work happening in the essential practices. Now what? How do we bring all of this together? How do we accomplish the vision of proficient reading for every student? How can we ensure that the right students are in the right groups, focused on the right skills? How do we ensure students are mastering the skills they need and moving forward in that reading proficiency trajectory as efficiently as possible? We knew that we needed to leverage that early literacy system and refine the approach to data-driven small group instruction to really move the needle with kids. And so the result of that was an instructional strategy that you have heard Sarah already refer to as the Reader and Writer Project. That's how they have named it. And it is a 45-minute instructional block that is solely targeted on small group foundational skills instruction. So let's take a quick look at what that entailed.
Okay, so as Julie said, we had the data on our students. Now, how do we move this forward? What we started with was using the data to group our students based off their micro phases through that EL benchmark assessment. Then we aligned those groups with goals and learning targets to create a pathway for their success. After that, we plan for the instruction, and I mean to the minute details of instruction. Our students get super targeted instruction daily around those microphase skills to ensure they're meeting their goals. Next, we looked at who's going to be in the classroom to support the work as it moves. So if the teacher's meeting with students, what are the other students doing at that time, and how can we plan for someone to be there to support their learning during that time as well? And last but not least, we monitor our students' progress to ensure that we're giving them the most targeted instruction, the most aligned to their needs in the moment.
All right, so we're going to do a quick rundown of just to stamp like the work of the essential practices in this project. So first, it is aligned to Tier 1 foundational skills curriculum and provided materials. Second, there's protected time in the school day that is dedicated solely to this project. The third, the project goals and learning targets are centered around the skills within the curriculum that are critical to grade level progression. 4, it's data driven. It's driven by current student data and student progress toward mastery of goals and learning targets. And last, leaders, coaches, teachers, push and support, and caregivers are trained, aligned in vision, and that they all play a key role in this process. Without the system, this project could not have got off the ground. So now let's take a closer look also at leveraging that professional learning system. So as you can imagine, the Reader and Writer Project small group instructional strategy for Haywood was quite the endeavor. It took all hands on deck to be able to make it happen, and the early literacy stakeholders played an incredibly important role in that effective implementation. So how did they make it happen? They had to have a really strategic plan for professional learning. So once the team is established, it is going to be very important to have that strategic plan and ensure that that team is trained and supported and leveraging the professional learning system. So while the training and the coaching may look different for each group of stakeholders based on their role and responsibilities within this project, it is important that all stakeholders receive the training and support that they need to fulfill their role. Additionally, it is important that someone or a leadership group is strategically planning, coordinating, and ensuring delivery of that support. Sarah, do you want to share a little bit around the wins and challenges here?
Sure. Just to reiterate, strategic planning is everything in any kind of implementation, but specifically in our district, a lot of our teachers had never even heard of the science of reading. So that content knowledge was a gap. We lived in a balanced literacy world for a very long time, and we had to have training in place to ensure our teachers understood what a sounds first approach was, what it looked like, and how they support it in their classroom. A challenge for us was implementing teacher voice because it was so new. Our teachers had really critical feedback, not critical in a bad way, critical as in like helpful feedback. But implementing all the feedback at one time and hearing it all at one time was a lot. So we've had to bite size and chunk it out. And as we look at different aspects of our program, receive the feedback and make adjustments where that happens. We have been very well accustomed to meeting about our students' data for a long time, but I feel like a huge win now is when we sit in a data team meeting, we're not talking about Julie doing great. We're talking about Julie knows all of her letters and sounds, but she is struggling with onset and rhyme. Our conversations and our data team meetings are that granular now where we're able to impact students past they're doing great or they're struggling.
Thank you, Sarah, for sharing that. And so now let's take a look at some results, because we all want to see what the results are, right? And so now I want to make sure we have plenty of time for Miss Cindy to share her story as well.
So I mentioned earlier that before we didn't see any real change, but I think the slide on the screen shows you some real change. This is the stuff that keeps us going. The data that you see here is our kindergarten class from last year. So they're current first graders now. Many of them came to us without any prior school or at 90 days of pre-K at best. During the pandemic, the year following the onset of the pandemic, they may have been in school 90 days. So in our district, kindergarten typically comes to us a little bit behind, and that's a pretty big deal. So when these students entered in the fall, 64% of the students qualified as at risk. To reference the previous slide, these students are in the bottom two quintiles. We saw some growth on the winter benchmark, but by the end of the year, we more than flipped these numbers. 24% of students left the bottom quintiles. In my role, I get super excited about seeing the numbers on the screen because I can't always tie them to a face, but Miss Cindy definitely can offer you more context and the excitement about what happens in her classroom every single day.
Yes, this is just an example of some of the small group in our room. And one of the things I want to share too is when you look at that triangle, sometimes colors give us the data that we need. But I wish I could see those little faces that I see when I look at that green, yellow, and red. And last year, I had a student come to me from New York, and he was in a self-contained classroom. He had several goals for IEP, and his parents were really excited when he came here. And we realized that I was a kindergarten teacher of an inclusion classroom, so we'd be in a classroom with an array of students. They were really excited about it. When I first tested Max on the EL benchmark, I realized that he knew his letter and letter sounds, but his phonemic awareness was extremely weak. So I put him in one of the beginning microphases, worked on him with that. He came to us in October, and by February, he took his first book home, and his parents didn't know he was getting that book. And they sent me a message on Facebook saying, wow, our son who came to you in a self-contained special ed classroom is reading a book. And they were in tears. They sent it to all their family, and we were just so excited. And it just made me feel better that I was doing something that actually worked. So right now, I actually have some testing that I do with my kids too. And I think about a little girl that I have named Jalay, and she scored at 8% on her fall. And at winter, she scored at 87%. And this just shows that a lot of the things that I'm using is she same thing. Her phonemic awareness was real weak. Her letter and sounds were real weak, but I just went through those learning targets, and now she's reading, and she has gone up to my tier 1 group, and she's in one of my top reading groups right now. So I'm very excited about that. But it is a lot to do. At the beginning of the year, one of the things we do is we take all the children and we do an EL benchmark on them. We also look at our Aimsweb and our iReady data, and we use all of that to decide what kind of microphase do these students need to be in. And we group those students into microphases, and then we begin to look at those learning targets, which are so important. And we attach those learning targets to that specific group. And so within my classroom, I have students that are in the early microphases to the latter microphases. So if you walk in my room, you're going to see 3 of us. You'll see my assistant who will be working with a group. I will be working with a group. My push-in will be working with a group. And the other kids are doing some independent work, or they're working on iReady on their computers. And when you walk around, you'll see students doing different things, because I make a lesson plan at the beginning of, for the week before. I make a lesson plan, and it tells exactly what Miss Burnetta will be doing that day. It tells me with a specific group what I will be doing with a specific group, and what Miss Rebecca would be doing when that group comes to her. So one microphase will have all these learning targets and exactly what each teacher will do with that child to meet that learning target. We're constantly making anecdotal notes. You see us writing on paper, on sticky notes. And what we do is we write on our lesson plans, and on Friday they hand me the lesson plans. I take them home. I mark out targets that the kids have mastered based on the progress monitoring and the notes that we've taken. And then I redo our lesson plans for the next week. And that's how it works. It's not an I at all, it's a we. If I did not have these ladies helping me as much as they were, I could not see my scores go up as much as they have from the fall until the winter. And that's what I had in the fall. I do have an inclusion classroom. I have 3 of my kids with IEPs. Within this right here where you look at, I have 1 child who has an IEP for developmentally delayed. He just tested out at Christmas. He will not have an IEP for developmentally delayed no longer. So we were very excited about that, and so is he. He came in the same way. We just worked through the learning targets, we worked through the phases, and he got what he needed, and he bumped up, and he's reading, and he's spelling, and he's writing the sentences. He's doing everything we want him to do. So it's so exciting for us to actually see something that works. Communication has been the biggest part of it too. Just like they said, when it comes to Reader Writer Project, you have people running out of the office from all over places going to a classroom. It takes all of us working together. My instructional facilitator is just amazing. We have had several questions. Anytime we've had a question that we are thinking, I don't know what to do, or what I'm using isn't working, or I'm not seeing the results, like I have this learning targets that's just kind of stagnant and staying there. Anytime we've asked Miss Julie or Mr. Jose, they're right on top of it. We ask for some videos where it's like, we feel like we're stagnant in what we're teaching or how we're teaching it, or we're not seeing the results we want. Miss Julie was real quick, great. I'll show you a video. I'll show you some new ideas. We were there the next day saying, all right, we've got this new stuff we're using. And what was nice too is our instructional facilitator takes a lot off of her plate, because when she saw some of the things that Miss Julie was doing, she made those for us, and it was a sheet of paper that goes with every cycle that the kids are working on. And it was so nice, because now all I had to do was cut them up, and within 2 days I had them in front of the kids doing exactly something new that I heard from Miss Julie. So that's what the teamwork is everybody. I can go to anybody, my principals, and everyone is going to give me good sound advice and listen to me, and if they don't know the answer, they find it out. The thing is that this is so exciting for me to see the results that I have. But I think back, I have been teaching for 24 years, and I've been teaching intervention for that long too. I taught intervention in the 2nd and 3rd grade. And one of the things at the time is we had a great program, state of the art, research based. But a lot of us teachers were like, I'm just not seeing the results, or it seems like the kids in the 2nd grade are still coming to us in the 3rd grade, and we haven't. But we did what we were supposed to do. We did what we were given, and we knew something was wrong. We just didn't know how to fix it. Several years later, I found myself in a 6th grade classroom with some of these same students that we had taught in the 2nd and 3rd grade for intervention. I was asked to do an intervention for a group for some 8th grade boys. I said, okay. So during intervention, I had these 8th grade boys walk down the 6th grade hall, and you can imagine their first impression was how they felt about coming. And I tried to explain to them, it's just about learning to read. I did a little test on them and found out that they were actually reading on a 3rd grade reading level. I think what was really hit me hard is I thought, I know how hard us teachers worked with these same students in the 2nd and 3rd grade. We gave them our heart out. We gave them every intervention, what we were given to give, and it just didn't work. And it makes me sad when I think about those boys now. I hate they had to walk down that hall. But one thing I have to think of is I can't change what was in the past. I can change now. And I am changing what's now. Right now, what we're doing is, I know, looking right there, I'm getting my kids where they need to be. So I won't have 8th grade boys walking down the hall to a 6th grade classroom because they're reading on a 3rd grade level. Change is what we all want. And now I feel like I'm making that change. And that is my redemption for how I felt like I did not meet those kids and need them. So that's how important this program is to me. And I just love it every day. And I'm constantly learning something new, constantly learning how to do things better. But that triangle is pretty proud to see.
What about that passion? This is why we do the work, you all. Like, this is why we do it. And Cindy's story is consistent with several stories, many stories across Haywood County, and they have the same passion and desire to do this work. And I get the pleasure of getting to go and be with them next week in person, and I just can't wait to get there. So thank you so much for sharing your story and being brave enough to share your story. And I hope that everyone enjoyed hearing about that. So we know that with any program, like we talked about, it takes a lot, and it also has its share of challenges. So we just want to quickly share a couple of things just to keep in mind from lessons learned from us. Continued professional learning matters. Observation and feedback cycles matter. We can't just implement on the front end and expect that it'll continue to flourish and to grow. You have to water and feed the seeds. So we can't just plant the seed. We have to ensure that that continues to happen. Continued system step back and refinement matters. We have to ensure that we're observing and that we're providing feedback and that we're holding teacher focus groups and that we're looking at the system as a whole and figuring out what are the things that we need to continue to refine and what is our plan to get there. And last, well, not last, clear guidance and support around small group instruction, data collection and analysis matters. Teachers really, they crave support around this to know what do we need to be looking for. And when we get the information and we're looking for it, now what do we do with it? So creating a strategic plan for that work really makes a significant impact. And last, but certainly not least, teacher voice matters. Listen to the teachers within your system. They're the ones doing the work and they are experts in of themselves. And so making sure that their voice is a part of this because it's their program. We just get the opportunity and privilege to be able to support and implementing that program.